All right, guys, so tonight I've got you, we're going to do operations, which covers daily operations of your unit. Then we're going to go into hazmat. Then we'll go into some MCI and special operations kind of things. So this is the fun part. This is the exciting part of your job, but it can be mundane too, and people become complacent and they don't do their job, and then mistakes happen. So the biggest thing you need to do is when you go to work is you need to be prepared, and this is what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about preparing, receiving, responding to a call, transferring patients, transporting patients to the hospital. Topics will be transferring the patient to the emergency department, terminating the call, and air rescue. Preparing for the call. Like I said, the biggest thing when we go to work, we need to be prepared. You need to have your uniform on. You need to have everything ready to go, because many times, as soon as you hit the door, you get a call, and you got to be prepared. I've worked with people over the years that the first thing they do is they go to work and they sit down, they read the paper, or they drink a cup of coffee, and they then boom, we get a call. Before I even walked into the door, I went right to my unit, and I did three things. I checked my oxygen to see what it was. I changed the batteries in my radio, and I changed the batteries in my monitor. And that way I knew that I could at least get by. You know, if everything else went haywire, I had those three things. I had oxygen, I had a monitor that worked, and I had a radio that worked. Because believe me, there's many times when people aren't prepared and you get that first call, and then you're in trouble. All right. This is what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about different types of ambulances. This is what we call a Type 1 ambulance. A Type 1 ambulance is typically a heavier duty unit, and it's a chassis, and they've put this box, we call this a box, on the back, and they set that on the box. A lot of services, what they'll do is they continue to use that same box. When that truck gets 200,000 miles on it, they can send it out for, they call it rebuild, and they send it up to Atlanta, or there's a place in Huntsville that does it, and they'll take the back end, the box where we're sitting, and they'll take that off, and they'll set that down on a new, they'll buy a new truck, and so they keep their expense down quite a bit doing it that way.
So what you're saying is the front part where the engine is, and then there's like a little sled, and they just lift the box on and off?
Yeah. It's just a chassis. All this is right like this. I don't know why my pointer isn't working, but anyway, what they do, guys, is this, when they order it from Ford or Chevy or whatever, then all they're ordering is a 350 or a 450 without anything on the back. They could make a dump truck out of it. They can make a welding truck. They can make a wrecker, whatever. When they order it from the dealer, they're just ordering a truck. Then they take this whole back end off of it, and they set it down, and then they make it into an ambulance. Now, the Type 2 ambulance is basically a van. And what they do with a van, then they'll take this and they'll cut that roof off, and then they'll add this portion here, and and that makes it available to stand up inside. I feel like this Type 2 works better for urban areas where you're not going real far over the road and things like that. When you start doing over-the-road transports, you need this or this special heavy-duty one here. Now, one advantage of this Type 2 is it's usually wide open here. A lot of times there's not even a wall here. if there is, it's more of a you can pass through. Here is similar to what we have. Here, all you got is this little cutout and a little hole there. Now, the type 3 is a van, but instead of it's a van style, but instead of a full van, then they put a box on the back again, and they can interchange these when they trade that in. Now this type 4 is what you're seeing more and more now, because you become when somebody's doing a lot of over-the-road transfers, going to Atlanta, going to Birmingham, running up and down the interstates, this is a heavier duty. This is like a big Freightliner or some other heavy-duty model. A lot of times you'll see these as fire departments because they like to buy big and they think big is better. Sometimes it is, but when you're just running around and the hospital is only 2 or 3 miles away, you really don't need that big boxy unit here. Now, some other areas, what they'll get into is they'll actually use these as for special rescue too. They may have extrication equipment and things of that nature in there, so they'll have that bigger unit. But these are the 4 types of units, and most likely you'll see questions on National Registry about this. You may not see but one, but seems like they always ask, well, what about a type 1 ambulance or a type 2 ambulance or something of that nature? So being prepared is knowing where and what is on your truck. Now that you're a student, you're going to different places, you're working at different things, and so you should be asking a lot of questions and figuring out where everything is. Because you're going to be in the back and they're going to say, start me an IV bag or spike me a bag or hand me this or what. And then he's going to be busy doing something else, and he doesn't have time to tell you where it is. So when you start the day, find somebody that will walk you through the unit and show you where everything is. So part of the job of the EMT or the driver is to ensure readiness for service. And he must make sure his vehicle and equipment are ready for use at the beginning of each shift. Here again, every place is different where you work. I've worked at some places where you're supposed to wash your truck at the end of your shift. Other places you're supposed to wash the truck at the beginning of the shift. But most doesn't matter when and where you wash the truck, but all the places you work, you'll have a check-off list. And every morning you're supposed to check off. Do you have 3 extra air bottles? Is your main O2 over 500? Do you have 3 backboards? Do you have all the C-collar bags? You know, what I'm saying is there'll be a checklist, and when you go on duty, you're supposed to go down this checklist and see that you have everything on the unit. Because what's going to happen, and it happens all the time, people become complacent, and then they start their shift, and they start goofing around, they don't check off, then they get a call, and then they get another call, and then the third call, maybe it's a diabetic. And then all of a sudden they go in the bag, and there's no glucometer. And they say, oh, did we lose the glucometer? Did the other shift lose the glucometer? Well, it's going to fall on you because you didn't check off the truck first thing in the morning and find out whether the other shift's going to say, oh, we didn't lose the glucometer. And they might have lost the glucometer on a call, but because you didn't check it off and you're halfway through the shift and you realize that you don't have a glucometer, then it's going to fall back on you, where it really wasn't your mistake. Your mistake was you didn't check off the truck. What should you check? Whatever's on the list. All right. So as an EMT, usually your responsibilities are as a driver is the truck. Now, as a paramedic, I cared about the truck, but I was more concerned about what was in the back. When I was checking off my stuff, I gave it to my partner to make sure all the lights were on, where we had good fluids, where there was leaks or anything like that. And that was his responsibility, but it would fall back onto me because I was the higher ranking person, but you split roles. The role of the EMT is usually not checking unless you've got a real lazy paramedic or a real lazy person that you're working with, and he says, you go do everything. I'm gonna sit there and watch Captain Kangaroo or whatever it is in the morning. So usually your responsibility is gonna be the truck and his is gonna be the back. When you, there's certain ways to doing this. One of the things is you would check the unit without it running. There's certain things you can check without it running. You're going to check oil and fluid levels and things like that. And then you'll start the unit. Then you'll check your lights, you check your sirens, things like that. You check your air conditioning, stuff like that. So you'll want to do like a walk around. Sometimes you can have your partner. He'll be in the back. You put on the brakes, you flick the lights, and he'll give you the okay. But when you turn the unit back on, then you'll find out if there are any gauges or anything like that. You can also notice whether you have fuel. Because that's another thing. People typically, the off-going shift will say, hey man, we got busy, we didn't put fuel in yesterday. Well then all of a sudden you turn on the unit and it's like less than a quarter of a tank, and you say, man, they could have added fuel. But then you know right off the bat that you've got to go get fuel. So you do an engine on, engine off check. I want to show you a little thing. This has to do with about mouse. Okay. This shows you what happens when you don't do your check. I don't know. Just coming on. All right, this would, when this shows up, you'll see this person probably didn't do a very good check off that morning, and it, I guess it's just loading, huh?
Once it's loading. It could be 10 minutes this morning to bring up one thing. You can see it loading,
Come on.
it's probably that little picture was involved. If you click it, it just go on.
Finally. It's killing me.
All these right here is done. Try and put a little arrow and see if it moves down, down.
Okay, it looks like they're at a Shell filling station. They probably went in there to get a cup of coffee and a donut.
It's
It-
Just reloading.
Pause it and bring it back. You don't know faster.
Huh?
If you pause it, just let it load.
Do what?
And drag it back,
Yeah,
drag
drag it
the
back.
circle back.
Now start.
Now, I don't know what went wrong here, but something big went wrong. And this is what happens when you go to work and you don't check your unit off and you drive with it, and there's a mechanical problem. Wait till you see what happens. That thing is burning, baby. Yeah, they keep waiting. They're not real smart either. What? Well, it's coming up. It's getting ready to come up. It blew the roof off, guys. That was the oxygen cylinders blowing off. Yeah, the first one. So that's, it scared the stuffing out of that guy. He dropped the camera. That is a hot fire, folks. I want to show you, this is where it gets kind of funny. After about 4 or 5 minutes, the fire department finally shows up. So watch these knuckleheads. Now here's this fire chief. He's a volunteer fire chief. He's talking on the radio. Listen to him. He's saying about not having enough water.
I don't know if they're going to do that with 500 gallons.
Well, why don't you find a plug?
55 still en route.
There should be a plug right on the
That's going to have a lot of O2 on board. One of them
Now here,
already
watch
blew.
this
Blew the
guy
whole
though.
top
This
off
is
the
what's so
thing.
funny to me. Watch this other guy. He walks right up to this thing, and his line isn't charged. He's walking right up to the back, and his line isn't charged. He's not even ready. He's not even ready. He's just walking around. All of a sudden, that thing's gonna blow up. I ain't walking up there without. But anyway. Yeah, I just find, to walk up on that, a burning fire, there goes another one, and they're just standing there. No big deal. I can take a couple days off. Anyway, the point on that, guys, is in this case, somebody probably failed to write up something, and they continued to use that truck, and there was some kind of mechanical injury. Issue with it. So how do we get a call? We get a call from dispatch, our emergency medical dispatchers. Now here, sometimes you have to go through several layers to get to the right person, but in most bigger cities, you'll dial 911 and they'll ask you, what is your emergency? Police, fire, or EMS? And then they'll route you. There'll be one operator, and she'll route you right to the whatever the corresponding unit is. These people, once you get to the proper dispatcher, then they will interrogate the caller, and then they'll assign priority to the call. Now, I don't know how they do around here. Some of them non-emergent response or lights and sirens. You know, there's just different terminology. They might say, yeah, go ahead. They may say, now, where I work at Mobile Fire, we didn't do any non-emergent. We didn't do any transfers. We didn't take anybody to dialysis or thing like everything else. And then we only went to the higher level calls. We didn't do one falling with a sprained ankle. We went shooting, stabbings, chest pain, difficulty breathing, and major car wrecks and things like that. We call it BLS services would take the lower priority calls. So this person would decide at this point who to dispatch, which kind of units. Here it's not so big a deal because there's only, well, you've got East Alabama, and then now you got CARE involved, but you know they decide who they're going to send, what kind of units. They dispatch, and then they coordinate EMS resources. They also would, determine whether they need fire, police, and or any other special services. Operating the ambulance. Okay, now here's something. When we're operating the ambulances. What you've got to become being able to do many tasks at once. And you would normally not operate your vehicle this way. You're talking on a radio, you got one hand, you're doing lights, you're looking. So you've really got to pay attention. You've got to do the best you can. But to do that, keep in mind, if you're speeding along at 90 miles an hour, it's going to cut down your response time. So they've proved that you don't need to go that much faster, that you don't get there that much quicker. So keep that in mind in the due regard that you're operating at a safe level, okay? Yeah, well, these guys are just, until they have an accident, then, they go. All right, so we got to understand the law. And what's the law? What does it say we do when we go to an intersection?
We slow down and ask permission.
Slow down, stop, look both ways, and you're asking them to yield to you. They don't really have to yield. I had a partner. We had a partner. Lyndall and I were on the way to Florida for a conference or something, and I would have been working with them that day, and they ran a call. We had a student in the back. They had a student in the back. Another boy was driving. My partner was in the back, and they went through. This was in Foley. We call the Foley Beach Express, and 98 goes back and forth to Pensacola and Foley. Well, anyway, they came up to the intersection. There's a big intersection there. There's like 2 lanes in all 4 directions and it turns, and they were going east from Foley in that intersection. They had a red light, but all the lanes were stopped. This late and the southbound lane was stopped. This lady went around through all 3 lanes, went around and T-boned the ambulance in the back end. She was talking on the cell phone, T-boned the back end of the ambulance, flipped the ambulance. It broke my partner's collarbone, and he never could lift a stretcher after that. The other boy broke his back, and the student who was in the back broke her arm. Well, when they went to court, they said that she wasn't at fault because she had a green light. So anyway, that just goes to show you. It goes to show everybody else was stopped. This lady went around, drove around on the grass, hit the tail end with lights and sirens going, and they weren't even going through. They had stopped.
And she wasn't even on pavement.
Well, she was on pavement, but she went around the turn lane to get through the intersection to go straight. She couldn't understand why all these people were stopped. But it just shows you how when you go to work, and I've said this before, when you in your EMS, fire, or police, you go to work and you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. Just keep that in mind. So anytime the public says you have done something, you've got to make sure you've done the right record keeping and done your job properly to protect yourself. Because you're a public servant and the public is right, unfortunately. So, and again, use your devices, sirens and lights, speed and safety. Don't have to go so fast. Escorted and multiple vehicle responses. Now, this is something that there's a lot of, it happens quite often. Now, in Mobile, we would respond out of the same station with an ambulance and a fire truck. We would, if we got into vehicles at the same time, we would like for the fire truck to hit the intersections before us, because everybody sees the big red fire truck and with all the sirens and stuff like that, and they yield for them. But remember, when you're following behind somebody, it's nice to follow behind the big fire truck, but then a lot of times people assume that that's all that's coming through there, and then they go ahead and go through the intersection. So give yourself a safety cushion. If you're following somebody, don't get right on the end of their bumper. All right, I'm going to show you this one. Let's see. This is the final one.
Is this Nichols Cave?
Yeah.
You might set that up a little bit while it's loading.
Might do what?
This from a movie.
Don't give me that look.
You guys seen that?
What look?
You know what look. It's all over your face.
Listen to
That I just saved a little baby boy look.
We just saved the little bouncing baby boy.
Bringing out the dead.
Bringing Out the Dead.
Oh, it's a movie.
It's a great movie. But
Thinking of that.
I don't want to hear about it, okay? That's 3 jobs for the night. It's over. 3 jobs. Time for a drink. 6 a.m., the cocktail hour. All right, so pass the bottle. I know you're holding.
The bar is now open.
I hate
You
Jen.
know, when I had that little baby in my hands, I felt like I was 21 again. Call like that makes me want to go back to working 3 nights a week, not 2. You know, start running again, cut down on my drinking.
We'll drink to that.
Here's to the greatest job in the world.
The greatest job in the world.
6-2 Young, I have priorities, Holden. Pick up the radio.
Don't do it, Marcus, please. Tell her the bus died. Tell her the radio's not working. Tell her her back's red. Just, tell her we're too drunk to take any more calls. Okay?
Let's take it.
No.
6-2 Young, this is Marcus. Only for you, baby. Only for you.
Keep it to yourself, Young. Male dip breather, approximately 30, West End and 72nd.
10-4, huh? I'm coming, baby. Big Daddy Marcus is coming. We coming. We Thank you, Jesus.
Are you all right?
Amen. Thank you, Jesus. Oh, thank you, Lord. Oh, thank you, Jesus.
That is the last time you do this to me, Marcus.
Where you going, Frank? I quit. I'm through. Oh, you think just because you quit, them ghosts gonna quit too? It don't work that way, Frank. I've been there, son. You need the Holy Ghost, Frank. The Holy Ghost.
that's great. The longer you work, the more you appreciate humor like that. But anyway, that was an accident. That's an ambulance accident. Now, a lot of that is comedy, but a lot of it is real. You know, many times I'm sitting there, it's the end of the shift, or we've run 15 calls and we're going through an area, and then all of a sudden they dispatch another ambulance, and I look at my partner and we're right there, and I said, I'm going to take that call. Don't take that call. Don't take that call. And I said, yeah, we got to take it, man. We got to take that call. You know, but you'll get that you'll get that camaraderie, or you get that conflict in the cab and things like that. And you've just got to be aware of what you're doing, and in this case, act properly. Of course, we don't do any drinking in the ambulance like they were, or around the ambulance. Now,
Or on your shift.
now most places, I don't know how they work around here, but places that I work, the first thing you do if you have a wreck, is they take you out of off service. And I'm not talking about a big wreck like that. I'm talking about you're backing into the patient's house and you run over their mailbox or something. The first thing you're going to do is they take you off duty, and then you got to go down and do a P test. And then they find out if you have any alcohol, drugs, or anything in your system. So, and then if you do, then it might be your last day on the ambulance. But anyway, keep that in mind. Due regard. This is what we were talking about, act in due regard. Now, when that guy took off like that, just boom, he wasn't acting in due regard. He could have probably responded in a normal manner. They were already en route. Think about this. They're in the ambulance. They don't have to go from their station, get in the ambulance and stuff. They're already en route, so they're going to get there quite quickly anyway. Right away, just what we were talking about, you're always asking for the right of way. Highway safety. Okay, when you're staging, when we come on scene for a accident or anything on the highway, ideally we should use cones. We should use cones. If you don't have cones, or you don't have you don't have a fire truck or a police car or something, what you can do is you can stage your ambulance behind where you're going to be working, and then if somebody runs in, they're going to run into the ambulance and they're not going to hit you. In this case, in the top case, you have a police car, and it with its flashers behind it, and then you're in front of it. Ideally, this is the best method, because think about it. You're opening these back doors, and then you're exiting straight to the accident, and you're not having to, here, you're going to have to take that stretcher, and you're going to have to go around here, and so you're making yourself vulnerable to being hit by another vehicle. So, as a driver, when you pull up, I know your adrenaline's going to be going, but what should be going through your mind is how safely can I park this vehicle? Avoid crossovers unless turn can be completed without obstructing traffic. What they're saying here is avoid going through the medium and things of that nature. Besides the fact that I've seen many cases where people bog down. When you're going through this medium, these other cars traveling in the other direction, or you're doing a U-turn in a simple 2-lane, they may not see you. They may be talking on their cell phone, and then you're going to get T-boned. You're going to get T-boned. In between Florida on I-10 and between Florida and Alabama, when we used to work out there on I-10, we used to work wrecks all the time on I-10, and you'd ask dispatch where the wreck was, and they'd say at mile marker 32 or 98, whatever the mile marker was, and we knew, and we actually had a book, and we knew where the crossovers were, because that section of the interstate, it's not like here in highway and 10 on Interstate 10. There's many areas where there's a lot of forest and swamps and stuff like that between both lanes, east and west, and you had to know where the mile marker. If the wreck was at mile marker 4, which was be on the Alabama side on mile marker 4, you might have to go all the way to Florida and turn around at the welcome station to come back. So we kept that in mind. I want to show you, this was my last day at work. My last day at work. And it can tell you anything can happen. Well, we had gone to my partner and I had gone to the grocery store, and we were having a big feast, and I unloaded all the, he was driving, and I unloaded all the groceries. We kept the groceries right. We were cooking, and we kept it, usually when we bought the groceries, they go right here in this wheel well here. So anyway, we loaded, and I was carrying the groceries in. I was full of bags and stuff, and the door was left open. Well, he jumped in then he came in and we started cooking the tea or whatever it was, and then he went out and decided to pull the ambulance back in. Well, when he forgot to look, and I wasn't backing him. I was inside cooking, and the door was wide open, and when he backed in, he took the door off. So my last day at work, as soon as we had to wait, and then the district chief came, and he had to write up an accident report. Then he had to go get a P-test. Then we had to go to the city garage and spend 3 hours while they put the door back on. So it was kind of a crazy day. But it just goes to show you stuff happens. And in this case, it was a simple fact that he didn't look in his mirrors, and there wasn't somebody backing him. So he actually got a warning letter, because anytime you're backing a unit, you're supposed to have a spotter. Okay, wearing your PPE. When y'all are doing your ride-alongs, is there an orange vest or a yellow vest for y'all when you're doing your work? When
Supposed to have by ourselves.
you buy one for yourself? They don't supply one? At Mobile, we had 2 in the cab, and then we had a third one because we would get riders, students and stuff all the time. And this is important. Another story, you say that it's not important. We ran a call. It was an automobile wreck. It was a dark, rainy night, and transported. And one of the policemen, a motorcycle cop, so he didn't have a car with a bunch of flashers. He was a motorcycle cop, and he was out there directing traffic. And we were on the other side of it. It was on the other side of a hill, and the car came over the hill, wasn't paying any attention. He ran over and killed the motorcycle policeman. And he didn't have a vest on or anything like that. And this was quite a few years. This is 5 or 6 years ago. And after that, it went. They made a policy for fire and police that any time we got out of the truck and you were on a street, you had to put your vest on. But it took this man's life because he didn't have a vest. Well, I don't know if that would have made a difference, but she didn't see him. So if you've got cones or flares, you can put those out, warning traffic, and then unit placement, like we were talking about, is important. All right. So, transferring patient to the unit. All right. So here again, so you've come on scene, and now you've got to decide where the patient is and how you're going to get the patient to the ambulance. You have a choice of many things. Now, in this case, you've got snow, and you've got irregular terrain and stuff. That stretcher may not run real well through that terrain. You may end up just taking a backboard and backboarding the patient and walking them back out. You've got to keep that in mind. I know Lyndall had a call one day. It was a jet ski thing way down in the woods?
Oh, no, they were rafting on that river, but it was way down in the woods.
Yeah, you had to, it took, it was like a 10 or 15 minute hike back to where the patient was, and they had to bring him back in that one. So package the patient properly. Another story about that. I was on scene with an engine unit one day, and this guy was a criminal. Him and his buddy had just robbed a 7-Eleven, and he was high on some kind of drugs or something. Then they had had an altercation with the police, and he was on the ground, and he had been fighting. And so anyway, we put him on the stretcher, or we put him on the backboard, and I told him, I said, you got to strap him down. You got to strap him down. And they go to lift the guy up. The engine company didn't do what I told them. They lifted the guy up to put him on the stretcher, and they got him up to about right here, and he rolled over, and I'm telling you, he went flat right down on the concrete, and he was messed up before, but when he did a nosedive right in the concrete, his face was all smashed in. And it was simply, they lifted him with the backboard, and they hadn't secured him properly. Packaging the patient. Sick or injured patients must be packaged so that the condition is not aggravated, okay? Remember that. Use your CIDs, your straps, your seat collars, and whatever. Your goal is to get them to the hospital without doing further damage. Okay, here's one. Your patient was injured when she dropped from a rope swing into the water, injuring her neck. Bystanders placed her on a large inner tube and carried her to shore. How would you package her from there? Huh? Backboard, okay. Seat collar, CIDs, okay, and straps. What you could do is you could slide, I don't know how she was on the inner tube, but hopefully somebody's holding C-spine. If they're not, as soon as you get there, you get somebody to hold C-spine, and then you can slide that backboard right up underneath her. And this is where we would do the, remember when we're rolling the patient or putting on, remember that about the posterior, because once you go down on the backboard, it's hard to look for injuries and see these injuries. And you're cruising along to the hospital, and all of a sudden you see this pool of blood coming off the backboard, and you're wondering where it's coming from, and it's a wound that you haven't seen. Another quick story: there was in Pensacola, there was a call at a Mexican restaurant, and it went out as cardiac arrest. And the unit got there. The man was outside at the entrance to the restaurant. They got there. He was pulseless. They started working him. They loaded him, took him to the hospital, which was only a couple minutes away. They got him in there. They hadn't taken his clothes. They hadn't started cutting his clothes. They took him off the backboard, started cutting his clothes, and all of a sudden they noticed blood on the back, and they look, and he'd been shot in the back. Okay, they were working it as a code, but it actually was a gunshot. The guy, turned out, he'd gone out. He'd gone to the restaurant, gone out and doing a drug deal in the parking lot, and then it went bad. Somebody shot him in the back, and he was walking back to the restaurant for help and collapsed. But it just goes to show you, you got to do a thorough survey. Thorough survey. And what we always say is cut off the clothes. When guys get in there, basically all they need to have is their underwear. A woman would have an underwear and a bra. You got to know what's going on. If you do start cutting the clothes, do cover them back up. Keep their modesty. Minimum of 3 straps. When we strap our patients to the stretcher, I think around here you guys are only using 3 straps. About a year or 2 ago, we went to 5 straps, where you had the 3 normal ones, and then you have 2 coming over the top that connect in this top chest strap. And it just secures the patient better. There you go, the shoulder harness. I tried to look it up. I was looking it up last night to see. I think it's actually in the Alabama protocol that you're supposed to have that.
Some of the trucks actually do have.
They do. Yeah, people don't use them. And when we went to them in Mobile, most of the time we weren't using them. But I'm telling you, when it's important to use them, when you've got a combative patient, every strap you got on there is good. All right. Think about yourself. If you're in the back, in the patient compartment, just like I told you about that young girl, she was a student. When that ambulance got thrown, she landed on her arm, broke her arm. When you're in that back compartment, and it doesn't even take a wreck. I'm telling you, I've been back there and I feel like I'm surfing. You know, the guy's going 100 miles an hour, which, you know, and you're yelling at him, slow down, man, I can't, you know. And I've had partners where in Mobile, the roads are so bad, and we're going 25 and 30 miles an hour down through downtown, and sometimes I just have to say, stop the truck. I get ready to start an IV. Stop. I mean, it's so rough. You're sitting there just like this, bouncing around. And we went to those big heavy-duty trucks, and like I'm telling you, they're good for on the interstate, but when you're downtown, they have a heavy-duty suspension, and they don't take those bumps well at all, and it throws you around. When you have that wreck, all that equipment, everything that's in those shelves, on those shelves, in those cabinets is going to come flying out. Remain seated if possible, and believe me, it's not possible. If you're working on your patient, it's pretty much hard to sit down. Except the other day we saw Lyndall and I were going to Birmingham. And I won't say who it was or what it was, but we were on 280, and we look over, and there's this ambulance, and they were going, and there was a guy in the back and a patient who was in the back, and the driver's up there, and we looked in the side view, and the guy was sound asleep. He was sitting there going, you know. So he was relaxed. He was in his seat. He wasn't providing much patient care, though, I don't think. All right, remember that you got continuous assessment. Once you get them stabilized in the unit, you need to keep on every 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how critical your patient. Secure the stretcher in place, position and secure the patient, adjust security straps. All right, I got another one for you. This is short. Well, I always do that. I do the left side. All right, this is with shoulder straps, guy. Watch this. He's got shoulder straps. Look what's happening. Boom. Where's that patient going? Right between that guy's legs. He probably broke his, might have broke his leg. Now, I'll tell you another quick story. I was called to a, let's see. Hold on. I'm going to go back to slideshow. X. All right. I was called to I-65 for an ambulance overturned. It was AMR ambulance. And I go and I pull up, and the ambulance is upside down in the ditch on the interstate. I says, holy cow. And there's all people around. There's people all around. And I walk up, and then both the paramedic, I don't know if this boy was a paramedic. I think they were both EMTs. And one of them, both of them, huh? Okay, yeah. One of them was a paramedic, one of them was a driver. Okay. Both of them were injured. Both of them were transported. My responsibility was to get the patient and transport her. And I already, as soon as I pulled up, I called for more units. I think they might have had some en route anyway. And I said, we've got 3 patients. I need some more ambulances. So anyway, I opened the back doors, and here was this lady. She was like 75, 80 years old. And I'm telling you, I was amazed. The one good thing this guy did, they ended up suing. The family sued, and I had to go to court for them. It wasn't for what I did, it was for what went on. But anyway, I opened the back doors, and I'll be darned if she was on her stretcher and it was like roof. The roof was here. I mean, the floor, the stretcher was on, it was upside down, and she was hanging there just like this. And he had packaged her well, and then there was really no further injury to her. She was unconscious from a fall. She had a brain injury from before, but I was shocked. And what I did is I ended up, we were like standing on the roof, and I got somebody to release the stretcher, and we had like 4 or 5 people in there, and then we just kind of had to flip the lady over, and I slid her off of that stretcher with the backboard and put her on my stretcher, and I took her on to the hospital. But that was a case where she was restrained properly. Be prepared. Just because you weren't dispatched for respiratory or cardiac doesn't mean that it won't happen while you're en route. Again, loose and constricting clothing. In this case, if they're conscious, you're just loosening and exposing. Load their personal effects. Now that's an issue. All right, when you go to the people's houses, many times they have boxes of drugs and and things of that nature. And they say, you want me to bring the drugs to the hospital? And I said, no, I don't want to touch them. What did I tell you? What happens when you go to work? First thing you're guilty. So if you take this Walmart bag with 20 pill bottles to the hospital, and then 2 days later, the lady checks out of the hospital and say the Lortab are gone. Then all of a sudden, they calling you wanting to know where the Lortab are. Well, she doesn't. First of all, she probably doesn't even remember how many Lortabs she took, and maybe the Lortab was already empty anyway. So my policy has always been, just tell me what she uses, and I'll write it down, or give me a list of her meds. I'm not transporting the meds. And I'm not transporting, we're not a taxi service while people think we are. All these bags and stuff like that. I said, you can bring that, get your family member to bring that in the car. Because what did I tell you? If you're in a wreck and all of a sudden you've got her bags and all this other stuff in the back, all that stuff is going to start throwing around. So consider that. Don't take anything in that unit that you don't need. You're going to need some kind of identification, and that's a problem because I've lost it. I've lost it or forgot about it. I put it in my pocket. But if you become systematic and do everything the same way, what I would do, I got to the point where, I have my own clipboard, and I would take her ID and her Blue Cross card or whatever, if I've got it. I wouldn't put it in my pocket because I would forget about it, because I have done that. And I'd take those and I'd put them under my clipboard, right where my run report was, my paperwork. And so I've got it. So I'm getting the nurse to sign my paper, and then my Blue Cross card and or at registration, wherever it is, the Blue Cross card and the driver's license are right there, and I give them to them. Then the next day, when they've lost the driver's license and they're calling you at home, hey, where's Miss Jones's driver's license? I say, hey man, I gave it to the nurse in her room. I handed it to the nurse. So keep that in mind. because you're going to get accused of a lot of things. And if you do it right and do systematically and keep good records, you will not be a victim. All right, so as your driver, you're going to have to call you're going to have to call dispatch and let them know you're loaded and you're en route. One of the things they'll usually want to know is what your mileage is. You'll tell them your mileage, and what I like to do, and I teach people, is to tell them I'm loaded one time. That means one patient, and I have one family member or one rider. So then all of a sudden, dispatch knows there are 4 people on that unit right now. You and your partner, the patient, and one rider. So it's important to let them know, because if something happens to you, if you have that wreck, then they know how many people are going to be in that car, or in that ambulance. This is when, en route, this is when you're getting all that sample history, a lot of that sample history that you may not have gotten en route on at the hospital. Transferring patient to the emergency staff. As you get to know the systems at each of these hospitals, the more you go, the quicker your transition can be. You'll know who you need to talk to, what you need to do. You just got to remember, one thing you got to remember is you've got a short amount of time there, and if you've got a critical patient and they're over there talking about the Alpha Psi Rodeo coming up this weekend, and they're not paying any attention. You said, "Hey, can somebody help me? This lady's having difficulty breathing. We need to get her back to her room as quick as possible." You've got to be proactive. You've got to be proactive. Lyndall and I had a call one day at Mobile Infirmary, and sometimes it takes you 10 to 15 minutes to get up to a room. Well, we were going to ICU. We were transferring her from ICU in Foley to Mobile Infirmary. Well, they started jacking us around in the ER. They jacked us around, and this lady was on a vent, and she was a ventilator, and it was sucking, and we only had this little bottle, okay? Well, they're calling this person and calling that person, and I'm going, man, and I'm looking over there, and we ran out of oxygen. But we were in the elevator, and I looked, and we had an escort. They used to give us an escort, and of course they give you the lowest person the first day on the job or something to be the escort. And I looked over and I said, she's coding, and we ran out of oxygen, and we were running down the hall doing CPR at Mobile Infirmary on the 6th floor up there, because they jacked us around so long that we didn't have any more O2, and the vent ran out of oxygen. So anyway, it happens. If you've got to be aware of it, and you've got to ask for assistance. Okay, once you've transferred the patient to the ER, your paramedic is probably going to stay in there. He's doing paperwork and stuff like that. Your job is to bring the stretcher back out, and you need to start getting the unit ready. First thing you want to do is you want to clean the compartment, and it's important, especially if it's a trauma, because it's blood's going to get on everything, and and it has a tendency, like that plate, that silver plate right here, it'll pool right up underneath here. And I've had incidents where we've mopped blood up, and then you take these screws out and you pull it up, and there's blood all up underneath there. But your evaluation will be determined as how good a housekeeper you are of that unit. You know, it's the paramedic's responsibility, but it's mainly your responsibility, and he's either going to compliment you or tell you need to do a better job, one of the two.
I have a question.
Yes?
If we actually have an incident like that where you think it might have been up under equipment, do we need to tell our supervising officer or person?
Yeah, I would. I mean, just say, hey, I tell you how you find out. This is how you find out. There's a couple places on here. Now you can mop and mop and mop. And what you got to do, especially if you start mopping and you put some water and stuff, what you do is you'll kind of step on this and it'll squish out. It'll squish out. You won't realize there's something until all of a sudden you put the stretcher back in, or the next call you put the stretcher with a 300-pound man on there, and all of a sudden then blood starts coming out from there. So in this case, just kind of step on it and look around. The biggest place you see blood is on the stretcher, and so what I typically would do is I would clean. I'd give my stretcher a real good inspection outside the unit and leave it outside the unit, then go inside, clean the unit, and the last thing I did was get my stretcher ready and put it back in. You know, so the stretcher's still sitting out. I'm doing all the cleanup in the cab, in the box, and then come out and worry about the stretcher. And it's giving it time to sit outside and air out or whatever it is. But if you put it up in there and try and clean, it's going to get in your way. All right, what you got to do is you got to call and report your dispatch, your status, just like we saw in that video. The one guy wanted to go home, the other guy wanted to take the call. But as soon as you're ready, you're in service, and you've got to call dispatch and let them know. Air out the ambulance, necessary for odor control. Run the vents, run spray in there, whatever. Be aware of what your fuel level is, and go get fuel as soon as you get through with the call. Contaminated linen. I got now here, around here, I think they use cloth linens, right, at the hospital. Yes. We use paper stuff, but we had a red bag. We have our own red bag on the ambulance, and you can load up your red bag. But if I'm loading up a whole bunch of stuff, rather than fill my red bag and then have to tie it off and sit it there and throw it at the, I would take my red bag with all my junk and leave it at the hospital. They're better at disposing of that than me carrying it around. I might get another call, and I've got a full red bag in the back with me. So I would, anything that's contaminated and I got a bunch of, boom, I left it at the hospital. Okay, lastly on this program, we're going to talk about air rescue, what you're going to need to do. A lot of times that's your call. Sometimes it's the fire department's call, based on where the call is, how long it's going to take you to get there. A lot of times they assess the severity of the accident or the problem, and they'll have the helicopter en route as you're en route. Now, what will happen sometimes is wherever the helicopter lands is not where the patient is. So many times you will treat the patient, load them in your ambulance, and then go to where the helicopter is. A lot of times they can land right where you are. Sometimes they can't. But you need to be, we'll talk about what you need to do and be aware of. Around here, because we don't have the trauma and the burns and the pediatric, a lot of times a helicopter is a good option. They can go to Atlanta, Birmingham, Columbus, or whatever. So keep that in mind, and remember your patient is the priority, and that he needs to get to the ER. We got the golden hour. We need to get him to primary care as soon as we can. All right. So who calls for the air helicopter? It just, what you're going to have to do is go through dispatch or whatever. Just give your and let them call. We never call. I never called direct. I would go back to dispatch, and then they would dispatch the helicopter, and then they'll tell you to. Then they'll call you back and say, Life Flight is on. Life Flight is taking off. They're en route to you. Talk to Life Flight on channel 3. Then you would talk to Life Flight, and you tell them where you are or where you're going and what you got or whatever, and then they'll show up, and then they make, a lot of times they make the decision of where they want to land.
I know with our fire department, we have latitude and longitude where you can actually put them, you can give them coordinates.
GPS.
GPS, you can put them right where you can.
Yeah, yeah. The back in the old days, these guys aren't as I'm not saying they're as good, but back in the old days, we used to have a lot of these old Vietnam helicopter pilots, and I'm telling you, those guys would land. You would be at somebody's house, and their backyard would be this big, and they just come, they sit right down in it. And now these guys, they got to have like, you know, they'd fly over Opelika, the football field, 4 times before they decide, oh, well, okay, we'll go ahead and land, you know. But in the old days, they were landing everywhere.
Well, these guys now are used to landing in the desert.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
nothing to obstruct their landing.
right. In Vietnam, they had lots of trees and other things that they had to learn how to land in. But one thing to remember, especially at night, you don't want to use any lights or anything. These guys are real sensitive. These pilots, they have their night vision, and you're not shining any light. Hey, we're down here, or whatever. You know, you don't want to have the landing zone lit up. They're real particular about even that. There's some special little beacons that some departments will buy, and they don't affect their night vision. But bright lights affect their night vision, and they don't want to do it. Be aware. We had it a lot down at the beach because we're landing in condos and stuff. A lot of times parking lots and condos where you got several things. You got sand is one, but the biggest thing is dumpsters. And all these condos have all these dumpsters, and these helicopters land, and as soon as that air wash comes down, then all this trash starts coming out of these dumpsters. So it can be a problem. And then they really want to land as flat an area as they can. Slope needs to be at least 8 degrees. And, huh? Less than, yeah, at least, yeah, at less than 8 degrees. And keep this in mind too, for your safety, if the helicopter is not on a level ground, then the rotor is going to be closer to the ground. As you're approaching, you know, that rotor is going to be lower. Loading helicopters is scary. And I mean, to today, there's a couple things that scare me. Working a wreck on the interstate, out in the middle of the interstate, and loading patients on a helicopter. It's just an accident waiting to happen. Here's a. You're
going to talk about hot, low.
Yeah. I'm just going to show them this first. This is a pretty good feel. You know, it looks like. Seeing they're using a backboard, they're just doing a 4-man. That's a hot load. You see his rotor's still going. I like this helicopter. You see that? That's a lifesaver right there, guys. That tail rotor, for many years, they didn't have this protected like that. And many many people have lost their lives walking into that tail. And I almost did one day. This guy, we were loading it, we were walking a patient. It was a backload helicopter like this. And this guy, the flight medic, was talking to me and yakking to me, and I wasn't, we're walking along, and I'm not paying attention. And I looked up, and we're walking right to that dead gum tail rotor, and I'm going, holy crap. And luckily, I just saw it at the last minute and moved to the side. But see, right now, these helicopters that they're producing, they have this is protected, so you couldn't walk into it. So right here, your big danger is height. But the other thing I always do, I don't care if the helicopter's 15, the rotor's 50. When I'm coming that helicopter, I'm bent over. That's a back load. See how it opens up from the back? As soon as I got them loaded, I'm getting the heck out of there. No time to socialize or anything. You just load the patient and go. They'll mess around for a couple more minutes, securing passes, put them on the stretcher and stuff, but there's no need for you to hang around that helicopter, because all it means is you will get hurt. The other rule, these pilots, now this is the flight, there's a pilot sitting right here, and you want to always be in visual with that pilot. You do not want to approach that helicopter from the back if possible. You want the pilot to be able to see you. So you come in this way, and he can see you. It up. I don't know if he was a full hot loader. His rotors were dirty, but it wasn't real high speed. But sometimes we go in there and hit them real high speed. As soon as you get them in, they're lifting off. Now he's coming up. You see how the rotors start pulling up? Anyway, so that's helicopter. So pretty much, like I said, the biggest thing is to know whether it's going to be a hot load or cold load. Cold load would mean he shut the engine down completely. And if it's a hot load, it's not a social playtime, because you read the biggest loss of life in EMS is on these helicopters, and sometimes it's on loading and things of that nature. Most of the time when they've taken off and they're trying to land places where it's not.
Y'all use Southern Union as a landing zone? Because last semester a helicopter landed in the middle of the parking lot.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, any parking lot they'll land. It just depends on where the accident or the problem is.
They even have a landing site for the interstate.
What?
They have a landing site for the interstate. Over there in Hoover.
All right, chapter review. Inspect the vehicle to ensure that it's complete and critical items can be easily located. That's your duties every morning. The laws in most states allow the driver of emergency vehicle running hot to break some of the vehicle traffic laws. However, it must be with due regard. Due regard. So it's saying that you can exceed the speed limit, but do you need to exceed it by 50 miles an hour? Do you need to run down Thatch at 85 miles an hour? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Your ambulance may go that fast, but you hit somebody and you're gonna be answering some questions. Pay attention to your driving. Secure all your gear. Don't be talking to your boyfriend or girlfriend on the cell phone while you're going to the hospital. Always wear your seatbelt. I can tell you, over my career, a lot of people have been injured because they didn't have their seatbelts. Unfortunately, my partner that day that broke his collarbone, he didn't have his seatbelt on. Okay, so guess what? He didn't get workman's comp because he went to workman's comp and they said you were hit in an ambulance, fine, but you didn't have your seatbelt on. So he changed careers. Then he went from being a paramedic to a equipment operator, bulldozer. Could never work again. You must be properly stocked and prepared. Pre-call inspections assure readiness and appropriate equipment. If the equipment ain't there, it's going to be your fault. Emergency medical dispatchers enhance patient care by providing pre-arrival instructions and obtaining. Get along with your dispatcher. I know that many times you'll get aggravated, but if you treat them with respect and don't be nasty to them on the phone, on the radio, and why are you giving us that call, stuff like that, because I'm telling you, it's going to bite you in the butt if you start being nasty to them, then they're going to start giving you every one of those calls. The 4 steps in transferring the patient to the ambulance: selecting the proper patient carrying device, that's the long spine board or KEDs or whatever it be, packaging the patient for transfer, securing them with all the straps, 5 if possible, moving the patient to the ambulance, lifting them, loading them into the ambulance, making sure it locks in place. Remember, patients should safely secure prior to the ambulance moving. Don't take off until your partner says go. I've had problems with that before. I said, hold on. Or what'll happen is, especially on a bad scene, you're in there and you've got 2 or 3 firemen in the back with you helping you, and then all of a sudden they're getting ready to, they know that they got to get off, but then whoever's driving takes off, and then they say, hey man, we got to get off. So keep that in mind. Clean your ambulance, replace supplies, ready the ambulance stretcher. Remember the reasons for using air rescue. The end. Any questions? That's my Tonka truck. All right, take a break and we will do the next one.